Sophia Carter wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, gripping the rag in her trembling hands as she scrubbed the bathroom sink. The scent of bleach filled the air, mingling with the expensive cologne that clung to the pristine hotel room. It was a daily routine she had perfected over the last 2 years, cleaning up after guests who barely noticed she existed. They walked past her in the hallways, their eyes skimming over her like she was just another part of the decor. Like the plush carpets or the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. But she was used to it. She had long accepted that in their world, she was invisible. That morning had started like any other. Sophia had clocked into her shift at the Grand Regency Hotel, a towering 5-star establishment in the heart of Manhattan. She had pulled her cleaning cart through the long hallways, moving from one suite to another, leaving each one spotless and untouched, as if no one had ever been there. She had learned to keep her head down, to listen more than she spoke, and most of all, to stay out of the lives of the rich and powerful who passed through the hotel's gilded doors. But today would be different. As she entered Suite 1407, her breath hitched in her throat. This wasn't just any guest's room. It belonged to Ethan Sinclair, the billionaire CEO of Sinclair Enterprises. A man whose name was on the front pages of financial magazines and whose fortune could buy and sell the entire hotel 10 times over. She had seen him in passing. His tailored suits, his effortless charm, the way he moved through life with the kind of confidence only the ultra-rich possessed. He was always surrounded by assistants, never lingering long in one place. It was rare to find his suite unoccupied, and even rarer to have a moment of stillness in a space so often filled with power and influence. As Sophia dusted the nightstand, she heard something, voices, low, hushed, and urgent, coming from the adjoining bedroom. She froze, her fingers tightening around the rag. She knew better than to eavesdrop on guests. But something in the tension of the voices stopped her from moving. "I'm telling you, he won't see it coming," a woman's voice whispered. Sophia's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. Isabel Sinclair, Ethan's wife. She had seen her before, beautiful, poised, and always carrying an air of quiet calculation. But now, there was something sharp in her tone. Something dark lurking beneath her usual polished demeanor. "You're sure this will work?" a man's voice responded. It was deep, unfamiliar, and laced with caution. "It has to," Isabel hissed. "Once he's on that plane tomorrow, it's over. No more complications. No more Ethan." Sophia's stomach lurched. No more Ethan? This wasn't just an argument. This was something else, something terrifying. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears as she took a slow, cautious step back from the door. The world outside the suite kept moving, the soft hum of distant conversations in the hallway, the faint clinking of glasses from the bar downstairs. But inside these walls, everything had changed. She had a choice. She could pretend she had heard nothing, keep cleaning, and walk away. She could tell herself it wasn't her business, that people like Ethan Sinclair weren't her concern. After all, what could a hotel maid possibly do against a woman as powerful as Isabel Sinclair? But then she thought about her mother. Sophia had grown up watching her mother work herself to the bone, cleaning houses for the wealthy, always reminding Sophia of one thing: never ignore your conscience. She had always believed that doing the right thing mattered, even if no one noticed. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the cleaning cart. Her heart screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to move toward the door instead. She needed to warn him. The next morning, the Grand Regency Hotel lobby was as bustling as ever. Ethan Sinclair stood near the entrance, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, his phone in one hand, a leather briefcase in the other. His security team flanked him, while his assistant rattled off details of his schedule. Sophia's breath came fast as she approached him, her fingers gripping the edges of her uniform. She had played this moment out in her head all night. But now, standing before him, she felt impossibly small. "Mr. Sinclair," she blurted out, before she could lose her nerve. He barely looked at her at first. His eyes flickered over her uniform, likely assuming she was asking about cleaning his suite. "What is it?" She swallowed hard. "I need to tell you something. Don't get on that plane today. Please." That made him stop. Ethan Sinclair's piercing blue eyes locked onto hers, his brow furrowing. His assistant, his security team, everyone around them stilled, glancing between them with confusion. "What?" he said, his voice lower now, more serious. "I can't explain everything," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. But I heard something. Someone wants to hurt you. Please, just don't go on that flight. A tense silence followed. She could see the disbelief in his expression. The way he was trying to decide if she was crazy. Or worse, lying. Who are you? He finally asked. I'm just a maid. She admitted, her voice breaking. But I'm telling the truth. Ethan studied her, his jaw tightening. She expected him to dismiss her, to brush her off as paranoid or delusional. But instead, something flickered in his gaze, hesitation, doubt. He didn't say anything, but she could tell he was considering it. After what felt like an eternity, he exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face before nodding to his assistant. Cancel my flight. His team stared at him in shock. Sir, just do it, Ethan snapped, before turning his gaze back to Sophia. For the first time, there was no condescension, no indifference in his eyes. Instead, there was something else, a silent question. What did you hear? Sophia swallowed, her hands still trembling. I can't say. Just, please be careful. Ethan nodded slowly, as if he understood, and then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his team scrambling to adjust his schedule. Sophia stood frozen, her heart pounding. Had she just saved his life? Or had she just made herself a target? As she left the hotel that night, exhausted from her shift, she found something waiting outside her apartment. A sleek black car, luxurious and out of place in her rundown neighborhood. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a crisp white envelope with her name written in elegant script. He extended it to her with a polite nod. Miss Carter, this is from Mr. Sinclair. He wanted to make sure you got it. Sophia's fingers shook as she took the envelope. Inside was a single note. You were right. Thank you. We need to talk. And just like that, she knew, this was only the beginning. Sophia Carter's hands trembled as she reread the note. Her breath uneven. The dim glow of the streetlights cast long shadows against the cracked pavement of her small apartment complex. She clutched the envelope, her heart hammering in her chest. You were right. Thank you. We need to talk. She had spent the entire night wondering if she had made a mistake by warning Ethan Sinclair. What if he thought she was crazy? What if, despite canceling the flight, he brushed off the danger? But now she knew he had listened. And now, he wanted to speak with her. But why? The sleek black car remained idling by the curb, the driver standing with the precision of a man trained to blend into the background yet always in control. He offered no expression, just the simple statement, Mr. Sinclair is waiting. Sophia hesitated. She had never been in a car like this before, something that smelled of wealth, power, and influence. For years, she had cleaned spaces like this, touched the edges of a world that never once acknowledged her existence. Now, she was being invited into it. With a deep breath, she climbed in. The ride through the city was silent. The driver didn't speak, and Sophia didn't dare ask questions. Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope, her mind racing. She still didn't know if she had done the right thing. If anything, stepping into that car, meeting with Ethan Sinclair, she was now deeper in this than she had ever intended. When they arrived at Sinclair Tower, a sprawling glass structure that pierced the skyline, she felt her stomach tighten. She had only ever seen it from a distance. A shimmering monument to money and success. A place she never imagined stepping foot in. The moment she stepped out of the car, a security guard ushered her toward the private elevators. No check-in at the front desk. No waiting in line. Straight up, the doors opened to his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the entire room, offering a breathtaking view of the city at night. The space was sleek and modern, dark wood, glass, and steel. The hum of the city below was muffled by the thick, soundproof walls, making everything feel eerily quiet. And there, standing by the window, was Ethan Sinclair. Sophia swallowed hard. She had only ever seen him in brief glimpses, walking through the hotel lobby, surrounded by assistants, speaking into his phone with the confidence of a man who controlled the world. But now, in the quiet of his office, he looked different. He turned to face her, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers. Sit. His voice was deep, steady, a command, not a request. She did. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply studied her, as if trying to piece together how a hotel maid had become part of the most dangerous moment of his life. Tell me, he finally said, his voice controlled but urgent. What exactly did you hear? Sophia exhaled slowly, her fingers curling in her lap. She had known this moment was coming. She had replayed the conversation 100 times in her head, debating whether she should tell the whole truth or leave parts out for her own safety. But she had already come this far. "I was cleaning your suite," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. "Your wife, Isabel, she was in the other room. She was talking to someone. A man. She called him Ryan." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She said." Sophia hesitated, but then forced herself to continue. "She said that once you got on that plane, it would be over, that you'd never come back." For the first time since she walked in, she saw something flicker across his face. Shock. Not surprise. Not dismissal. But actual shock. It was then that she realized he hadn't expected this. Ethan Sinclair was a man who controlled everything. His business, his life, the people around him. But what he wasn't expecting was for his own wife to be plotting his murder. His fingers tapped against the glass desk. His expression unreadable. "You're sure? I wouldn't have come to you if I wasn't." A tense silence stretched between them. Then, finally, he laughed. A quiet, bitter laugh. Sophia stiffened. "You don't believe me?" He ran a hand over his face, shaking his head. "No, I do. That's the problem." Sophia blinked. "What?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I knew something was wrong," he admitted. "Isabel's been distant, secretive. And Ryan," he let out a slow breath. "He was one of my closest friends." Sophia's stomach twisted. Ryan, the man plotting with Isabel. The man who had agreed to kill him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog. Suffocating and undeniable. Finally, Ethan leaned back in his chair. His fingers steepled together as he looked at her. "You saved my life." Sophia swallowed. You didn't have to tell me." He continued. "You could have ignored it, walked away, but you didn't." She lowered her gaze, uncomfortable with the intensity of his stare. I couldn't stay silent." Ethan nodded slowly. Then, to her surprise, his expression softened. "I owe you," he said quietly, "more than I can ever repay." Sophia shook her head. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know." Another silence stretched between them. Then, before she could stop herself, she asked, "What are you going to do?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He stood, walking to the window again, staring out at the city. "I can't go to the police." "Not yet." Sophia frowned. "Why not?" He turned to face her. "Because if I do, they'll make their move before I can stop them." A chill ran down her spine. "You mean they'd kill you before you could prove anything?" His expression was grave. "Yes." Sophia suddenly felt very small in this situation. She had thought warning him would be the hardest part. She had thought once he knew the truth, everything would fall into place. But this was bigger than she realized. "What do you need me to do?" she asked before she could think better of it. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "You're already involved, Sophia, whether you like it or not." She exhaled shakily. She knew that. He stepped closer. "But I need to know one thing." She met his gaze. "Are you willing to see this through?" Sophia's chest tightened. She thought of her quiet life, the long shifts, the cleaning, the safe, predictable routine she had built. She could walk away. Right now, she could pretend none of this had happened. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She had stepped into a war she never meant to be part of. And there was no turning back now. "I'm in," she said softly. Ethan nodded. Then, for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. Not a smug, businesslike smile, but something real, something dangerous. And just like that, Sophia Carter's life changed forever. Sophia Carter had always known struggle. She had learned to live in the background, in the spaces between recognition, where the wealthy and powerful passed her by without a second glance. She had survived on long hours, calloused hands, and the quiet acceptance that her life was meant to be ordinary. But now she was standing on the edge of something terrifying, something that could cost her everything. Ethan Sinclair's wife was trying to kill him, and Sophia was the only reason he was still alive. It had been 4 days since she had warned him, 4 days since she had stepped into a world that wasn't hers. And with each passing moment, she felt the weight of it crushing down on her. Ethan had disappeared from the public eye. No news articles, no sightings. His businesses continued to run like a well-oiled machine. But the man himself had vanished. She hadn't heard from him since that night in his office, when he had looked at her and asked, "Are you willing to see this through?" She had said yes. And now, she was waiting for something to happen, waiting for the consequences of what she had done to catch up with her. The morning after their meeting, Sophia had returned to work, trying desperately to blend back into the life she had known before. She scrubbed the floors of the hotel, changed the sheets, and pretended that she hadn't just been pulled into something far beyond her control. But everything felt different now. The routine no longer felt safe. Every shadow in the hallway felt like it was watching her. Every passing conversation made her stomach churn, wondering if they knew. Amanda Sinclair still walked through the hotel lobby, her heels clicking against the marble, her designer purse swinging at her side as if she hadn't been plotting her husband's murder just days ago. Sophia couldn't look at her without feeling sick. And worse, Amanda smiled at her now. It had started the morning after she had warned Ethan. The first time, she had simply acknowledged Sophia, giving her a small nod as she passed by. The next day, a polite smile. And then, by the third, Amanda spoke to her. "Good morning," Amanda had said, her voice smooth and charming. "I see you every day. But I don't think we've ever properly introduced ourselves." Sophia's blood ran cold. She had spent 2 years cleaning the Sinclair suite. Amanda had never so much as looked at her before. Now, suddenly, she was interested. Sophia forced a polite smile, gripping the cleaning rag in her hand like a lifeline. "Good morning, ma'am." Amanda tilted her head, studying her. "You work hard," she mused, her tone pleasant. "That's rare these days. I like that." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Did she know? Was this some kind of game? Before she could think of how to respond, Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, placing it on Sophia's cleaning cart. "A little extra," she said with a wink, "for all that hard work." Sophia's hands trembled as she stared at the money. By the time she looked back up, Amanda was already gone. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of her conversation with Amanda. She knew, she had to know. Why else would she suddenly acknowledge Sophia after all this time? Why the money? Why the smile? She felt trapped. If Amanda suspected her, she was in danger. And if Ethan didn't act soon, he wouldn't be the only one at risk. Sophia sat up in bed, running a hand through her hair. She couldn't do this. She wasn't built for this kind of life. A life of secrets and shadows, of deception and danger. She was just a maid. She didn't belong in this world. And yet, she had no way out. Because she had already made her choice. She had already warned Ethan. And now, there was no undoing it. The following evening, Sophia finished her shift at the hotel and made her way home. She had just stepped inside her apartment building when she noticed something that made her stomach drop. A black car sat idling across the street. The same black car she had seen outside Sinclair Tower. Ethan's car. Her heart pounded. Before she could react, the back door opened, and a familiar voice called out, "Sophia." "Ethan." She hesitated for only a second before stepping outside. She climbed into the car, the door shutting behind her with a quiet click. Ethan sat beside her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, finally, "She knows." Sophia's blood ran cold. Her throat felt dry. "Amanda?" Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze dark. "She knows someone warned me. She doesn't have proof, but she's been watching, testing people." Sophia swallowed hard, her pulse hammering. "And what happens if she finds out it was me?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "She won't." She let out a hollow laugh. "You don't know that. I won't let her touch you." His voice was firm, but there was something else in his eyes. Something dangerous. Sophia felt her breath hitch. She had no idea how far Ethan Sinclair was willing to go. But something told her she was about to find out. 2 nights later, Amanda Sinclair disappeared. The media went wild. Headlines flooded every news channel. Billionaire's wife missing, foul play suspected. Where is Amanda Sinclair? Shocking new details unfold. The world was obsessed. But Sophia? She was terrified. She knew this wasn't a coincidence. She knew Ethan had done something. And now, she had a choice to make. Did she ask? Did she demand to know what happened? Or did she pretend she didn't see the darkness creeping into Ethan's eyes? Because if Amanda Sinclair had truly vanished, Then Sophia Carter had just stepped into something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Sophia Carter had never been the kind of person to question things too deeply. She had spent her life accepting the cards she was dealt, struggling in silence, pushing forward despite the odds stacked against her. But now, as she stood in the middle of her small apartment, staring at the television screen with trembling hands, she wished she could go back to that ignorance. The news anchor's voice rang through the room, sharp and urgent. Breaking news: Amanda Sinclair, wife of billionaire Ethan Sinclair, has vanished without a trace. Authorities are investigating possible foul play, but as of now, there are no suspects. Sophia felt her knees buckle. No suspects. But she knew better. She knew exactly who the police should be looking at. Ethan. She had warned him. She had saved his life. And now, his wife was missing. Sophia clutched the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to steady herself. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. She had wanted Amanda stopped. Had wanted Ethan to do something, but not this. Not a disappearance. Not a crime that the entire world would be watching. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She jumped. The screen flashed with a name she had come to fear just as much as she had once respected it. Ethan Sinclair. Sophia hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to ignore it, to walk away and pretend she had never gotten involved in the first place. But she wasn't that kind of person. She had made her choice. She picked up the phone. "Where are you?" Ethan's voice was calm, controlled, but she could hear the edge underneath it. "At home," she whispered, gripping the phone tightly. "Are you alone?" Sophia's stomach twisted. She turned to check the locks on her door without even thinking. "Yes." A long pause. Then, "I need you to pack a bag." Sophia's breath hitched. "What? Now? Don't ask questions. I'll explain everything when you're safe." Safe. The word sent ice through her veins. Was she in danger? Was someone coming for her? Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she rushed to grab the nearest bag, shoving clothes into it with shaking hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was just a maid. A nobody. Why was she running like she was a fugitive? She needed answers. "Ethan," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "What happened to Amanda?" Silence. Too long of a silence. "Get in the car when it arrives," he finally said. "I'll explain everything." And then the line went dead. 20 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment. The driver didn't say a word as she climbed in, gripping her bag like a lifeline. The ride was smooth, almost eerily quiet. Sophia's mind raced. Why was Ethan hiding her? Did the police know about her warning? Had they traced it back to her? She hadn't committed a crime. She had only tried to save a man's life. And yet, somehow, she was tangled up in this mess so deeply that she wasn't sure she'd ever get out. The car pulled up in front of a private townhouse, far from the high-rise luxury of Sinclair Tower. Ethan was waiting inside. He looked different. Not the polished billionaire she had seen in magazines. Not even the man she had warned about his wife's betrayal. This version of Ethan Sinclair was unshaven, exhausted. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Sophia barely had time to drop her bag before she demanded, "What happened to Amanda?" Ethan let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. "She's gone." Sophia's stomach churned. "Gone? Gone where?" "I don't know." Her pulse quickened. She had been prepared for him to confess. She had braced herself for the possibility that Ethan had done something terrible. But this uncertainty? It was somehow worse. You didn't?" She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. Ethan's gaze met hers, dark and unreadable. "No," he said firmly. "But someone did." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Then why am I running? If you didn't do anything, why are you hiding me?" Ethan hesitated. "Because you're involved, Sophia, whether you meant to be or not." The weight of his words sank deep into her bones. She had only meant to help. She had only wanted to do the right thing. But now, her entire life was falling apart. Who else knew she had warned him? Who else wanted her gone? She had spent so much time worrying about Amanda. She hadn't thought to be afraid of whoever had gotten rid of her. The next morning, Sophia woke in the unfamiliar townhouse, exhaustion weighing heavy on her body. She hadn't slept, not really. She had spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how her life had spiraled so out of control. A soft knock at the door made her jolt upright. Ethan stepped inside, holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked just as tired as she felt. I need you to trust me, he said, handing her a cup. Sophia took it, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. But she didn't respond, because trusting him was what got her into this mess in the first place. Ethan sat across from her, rubbing a hand over his face. The police don't have anything on me yet, but they're looking. They know something happened. Sophia swallowed hard. Do they know about me? He hesitated. Not yet. Yet. The word made her stomach drop. Then what do we do? She whispered. Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. We wait, and we prepare for the worst. Sophia let out a shaky breath. Her life had once been so simple. Now, she wasn't sure she'd ever know peace again. To everyone listening right now, what would you do if you were in Sophia's shoes? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you were tangled up in a billionaire's dangerous secrets. Would you run? Would you trust Ethan? Or would you turn yourself in and hope for the best? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to know what happens next, make sure to like and subscribe, because Sophia's story is far from over. Sophia sat in the dimly lit living room of the townhouse Ethan had hidden her in, her fingers gripping the ceramic mug of untouched tea. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the storm raging inside her. Every part of her life had been turned upside down in the last few days, and she had barely had time to process any of it. She had never asked for this. She had been a simple hotel maid, unnoticed and invisible in the grand scheme of the world. But one act, one choice to do the right thing, had changed everything. Now, she was hiding, her name whispered in places she wished it never had been, her safety uncertain, and worst of all, she had no idea who she could trust anymore. And Ethan Sinclair, the man who had dragged her into this mess, was sitting across from her, staring into his drink as if it held the answers to all their problems. You still haven't told me what's going on, Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was afraid if she spoke too loudly, the walls might crack under the weight of the truth. Ethan exhaled heavily, rubbing his hands together. He looked exhausted, his usually polished and confident demeanor slipping away like sand through his fingers. Amanda's disappearance, he began, is not what you think. Sophia stiffened. What do you mean? Ethan finally met her gaze, and there was something in his eyes that made her stomach churn. Guilt. It was the first time she had seen that emotion on his face. And it scared her. She wasn't supposed to disappear, Ethan admitted. She was supposed to be exposed, arrested. I had a plan. I was going to take her down legally. But someone else, got to her first. Sophia's heart pounded. Someone else? Ethan nodded, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. Whoever it was, they had access. They knew where she would be. And now, he paused, exhaling sharply. Now they know you exist. The words hit Sophia like a punch to the gut. The air in the room grew suffocating. They knew about her. How? She whispered. Ethan hesitated, then pulled a small black envelope from his jacket. He slid it across the table to her. Her fingers felt numb as she picked it up and carefully pried it open. Inside was a single photograph. Her. A grainy image of her, leaving the hotel. Eyes darting over her shoulder as if she had already sensed something was wrong that day. Beneath it, a message was scrawled in bold red ink. She knows. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Someone had been watching her, following her, and now they knew she was involved. Her stomach twisted painfully as she looked up at Ethan. Who gave this to you? A friend inside the police force. Someone who's trying to help us. Sophia shook her head, pressing the heels of her hands against her temples. This was too much, too fast. This isn't my fight, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I didn't want any of this. I was just trying to help you. Ethan flinched at her words. But he didn't argue. Sophia had risked everything to warn him about Amanda. She had stepped into a dangerous world, believing she was doing the right thing. And now, because of that one moment of bravery, she was marked. She was hunted. I should go to the police, she said, standing abruptly. Tell them everything, if they know about me already. Hiding won't make a difference. Ethan's expression hardened. No, you go to them, and you're as good as dead. Sophia felt frustration clawing at her. So what? I just disappear? Live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Ethan stood now, too, his jaw clenched. I won't let that happen to you. She let out a bitter laugh. You think you can control this? Ethan? You think you can protect me? Look at what's happened. Amanda vanished before you could stop her. And now there's someone else pulling the strings. And we don't even know who. Ethan's face darkened. I will find out. How? Sophia demanded. How can you possibly fight something you can't even see? The silence between them was deafening. For the first time, Ethan Sinclair didn't have an answer. Sophia stood at the edge of the warehouse rooftop, the wind whipping her hair across her face as she stared at the darkened streets below. The city never slept, but tonight, it felt different, quieter, more dangerous. She had spent the last few weeks in hiding, looking over her shoulder every time she stepped outside, waiting for the inevitable. The fear had settled in her bones. An unshakable companion, whispering reminders that she was running out of time. Amanda's disappearance had left a void, but not the kind that brought relief. It had unleashed something worse. Now, someone else was in control. Someone more ruthless, more calculating, and they wanted her silenced. A shadow moved behind her, and she turned sharply, heart pounding. Ethan stood there, his face half hidden in the dim rooftop light, hands in the pockets of his coat. His eyes were dark, unreadable. You're not safe here, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Sophia let out a sharp breath. I'm not safe anywhere. Ethan hesitated for a moment before stepping closer, his posture tense. I know you're angry with me. You have every right to be. But you need to listen to me now. Tonight is different. They're making their move. Sophia felt her stomach drop. She had been preparing for this moment. Yet somehow, it still felt like ice in her veins. Who? She asked, barely recognizing the sound of her own voice. Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. Someone higher than Amanda. Someone who's been pulling the strings all along. Sophia swallowed hard. What do they want? Ethan's gaze locked onto hers. They want you dead, Sophia. The words hit her like a slap, even though she had known deep down that this was where things were heading. She turned away, gripping the edge of the rooftop railing, the city lights blurring beneath her. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. Ethan sighed, stepping beside her. I know. Do you? She turned to face him, her chest tightening with frustration, fear, and something she couldn't quite name. Because from where I'm standing, you brought me into this world without warning me what it would cost me. Ethan's jaw clenched. I didn't expect it to cost you this much. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. Neither did I. The silence between them stretched, filled with everything they weren't saying. Then, suddenly, a loud crack echoed from below. Gunfire. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Ethan's body moved instinctively, pulling her behind him as they crouched low. Another shot rang out, and then shouting. The street below came alive with movement. Dark figures rushed toward the building, their intentions clear. They weren't coming to negotiate. Sophia's pulse roared in her ears. This was it. She turned to Ethan, fear and adrenaline surging through her veins. What do we do? Ethan reached for the gun hidden beneath his coat, his face set in stone. We run. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the rooftop exit. They raced down the stairwell, each footstep echoing like a war drum against the concrete walls. Sophia's lungs burned as she tried to keep up. A third shot rang out, closer this time. Then a voice. Don't let them leave. Ethan yanked her down a corridor, pushing through an old metal door that led to the alleyway behind the building. The cold air hit her like a wall. But there was no time to think. No time to feel. They sprinted down the alley, their shadows stretching long against the pavement. The sound of boots pounded behind them. They were being hunted. Ethan led her toward a car parked a few blocks away, fumbling with the keys as he shoved her inside. The moment the doors slammed shut, the engine roared to life, tires screeching as they sped off into the night. Sophia clutched her seatbelt, trying to catch her breath. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Ethan said, his grip white-knuckled on the wheel. Sophia shook her head. No, tell me the truth, Ethan. Where are we really going? Ethan glanced at her, hesitation flickering across his face before he finally spoke. We're going to finish this. A past that won't stay buried. They drove in silence for nearly an hour. Sophia's mind raced, running through every possible scenario, every mistake she had made that led her to this moment. She had been a simple maid, a nobody, and now, her name was written on a kill list. Ethan finally pulled into a secluded lot near the docks. Cutting the engine, the place was eerily quiet. The distant sound of waves the only thing filling the silence. Sophia turned to him. What are we doing here? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. There's something you need to see. He opened the glove compartment, pulling out a file and handing it to her. Sophia hesitated before opening it. Inside were photographs. Old ones. Some of her father. Some of Amanda. Some of people she didn't recognize. And at the center of it all, a photograph of Ethan. A younger Ethan, standing beside Amanda and her family. Sophia felt her throat tighten. You knew them, she whispered. Ethan didn't look away. I did. Sophia slammed the file shut. And you didn't think to tell me that before? I didn't know how. Sophia's hands trembled. Tell me now. Ethan exhaled sharply. Amanda's father was involved in something big. Something illegal. And my family was part of it. Sophia's breath hitched. My father worked for them. Ethan admitted. He handled the dirty business. When things got bad, I got out. I thought I was done with all of it. Until I realized Amanda was trying to pick up where you left off. Sophia felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. You knew this entire time that Amanda was dangerous, she said, her voice hollow. I knew she was dangerous. Ethan agreed, but I didn't know she would go after you. Sophia shook her head, her chest tightening painfully. I trusted you, Ethan. I thought we were fighting the same fight. We are, he said quickly. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. Are we? Because right now, it feels like I've been fighting alone. Ethan leaned forward, his voice desperate. I swear to you, Sophia, I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you caught up in this. Sophia clenched her fists, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. But I am, Ethan, and there's no undoing it. He nodded, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. I know. The weight of everything pressed down on her. She could hate Ethan for keeping secrets. She could hate Amanda for dragging her into this. She could hate the faceless enemy hunting her. But hate wouldn't save her now. Only action would. Sophia took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Tell me what I need to do. Ethan hesitated. Sophia, tell me. Ethan searched her face, then finally nodded. And just like that, she knew. There was no going back. Would you trust Ethan after all his secrets? Or would you walk away, knowing it might mean losing the only ally you have left? Comment below. Let Sophia know she's not alone. And if you're ready to see how this story ends, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because the final battle? It's just beginning. The night air was thick with tension. The scent of salt and rust filling Sophia's lungs as she stood at the edge of the abandoned dockyard. The waves crashed against the shore in the distance, their rhythm a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside her. She had spent weeks running, hiding, looking over her shoulder, but tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't running. She was standing her ground. The file Ethan had given her was still clenched in her hands. Its edges crumpled from the grip of her trembling fingers. Evidence, proof of Amanda's crimes. Of the blood spilled in the name of wealth and power. Of the corruption that had cost her father his life. It was everything she needed to bring Amanda down once and for all. But it wasn't just about Amanda anymore. There was something darker beneath the surface. Something bigger than a single woman's greed. Amanda had been a puppet in a much larger game. And Sophia was just beginning to understand how deep the roots of this corruption went. And now, she had a choice. Run, disappear into the shadows like she always had. Hope that somehow, this nightmare would fade away. Or fight. She exhaled, steadying herself. There was only one answer. Are you sure about this? Ethan's voice was quieter than usual, the weight of his concern pressing down on her shoulders. Sophia turned to face him. His face was drawn, his normally sharp eyes clouded with something close to worry. I'm sure, she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. Ethan hesitated, then let out a slow breath. Then we need to move now. They're already coming. Sophia's heart pounded. Of course they were. Amanda was in prison, but the power she left behind still lingered. Like a venom that refused to fade from the bloodstream. There were people, powerful people, who wanted to make sure this ended with Sophia's silence. But she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Where's the drop-off? She asked, gripping the file tighter. Warehouse on 5th, Ethan said. Martinez is meeting us there. We get these documents to him. And it's over. It's over. Sophia wanted to believe that. But deep down, she knew the truth. This would never be over. Not completely. She had spent her whole life cleaning up after the powerful, existing on the fringes of a world that barely noticed her. But now they saw her. And they were afraid. That was enough to make them dangerous. Ethan motioned toward the car parked in the shadows. His posture tense. "Let's go." Sophia nodded, following him into the night. The drive to the warehouse felt endless. The silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Sophia kept her eyes on the road, hands clenched into fists in her lap. Every fiber of her being told her something was wrong. It was too easy. She had been running for weeks. Every time she thought she was ahead, Amanda's reach had pulled her back. And now, after everything, she was supposed to believe that this was it? That getting the documents to Martinez would make it all go away? No. Amanda might have been taken down. But her empire wasn't built on just one person. There were others. Others who were just as cruel. Just as ruthless. And they weren't going to let this end so simply. Sophia turned to Ethan. "How do we know Martinez hasn't been compromised?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "We don't." That was enough to make her stomach twist. She should have known better than to trust the system to protect her. The system had never protected people like her before. The car pulled into the warehouse district. The glow of the streetlights flickering in and out of the darkness. Ethan parked near the entrance, cutting the engine. Sophia's pulse quickened. No police cars. No sign of Martinez. Just an empty warehouse. Something was wrong. Ethan reached for the gun hidden under his coat. His face unreadable. "Stay behind me," he said. But Sophia wasn't about to cower behind anyone. Not anymore. She stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at her skin as she clutched the file against her chest. The warehouse loomed ahead, its towering frame casting long shadows over the pavement. Every step forward felt like walking into the unknown. Then, a noise. A scuffle of movement just beyond the loading docks. Sophia's grip tightened around the folder. Ethan drew his gun, scanning the darkness. And then, a voice. "You should have walked away." Sophia's heart stopped. A figure stepped out from the shadows, their silhouette sharp against the glow of the streetlight. Tall, confident, familiar. Amanda. Sophia's stomach dropped. "That's impossible," she whispered. Ethan's body went rigid beside her, his grip on the gun tightening. Amanda smirked. "You really thought it would be that easy?" Sophia's breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. "You're supposed to be in prison." Amanda let out a soft, mocking laugh. "Oh, sweetheart, you really don't understand how this works, do you?" Sophia's blood ran cold. The people Amanda had worked for, the real power behind the curtain, they had let her walk free. And now, Sophia was standing in the middle of a trap. The sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. More figures emerged from the darkness. Armed. Waiting. Sophia's pulse roared in her ears. Amanda took a slow step forward, her eyes gleaming. "You have something that belongs to me." Sophia's grip tightened on the folder. This was it, her breaking point. She had spent her whole life playing by the rules, waiting for justice to come. But justice never came, not for people like her. So she was going to take it for herself. She turned to Ethan, her voice steady. "You with me?" Ethan's eyes met hers. No hesitation. Always. Then it was time to fight. Everything happened in an instant. Sophia lunged toward the nearest crate, using it for cover as the first shot rang out. Ethan moved beside her, returning fire, his movements sharp and practiced. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Amanda's men swarmed forward, gunfire splitting the air, shadows twisting under the dim overhead lights. Sophia's heart pounded as she clutched the documents to her chest, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She couldn't let Amanda win. Not again. A figure moved toward her, a man. Gun raised. Sophia didn't think. She reacted. She grabbed a rusted metal rod from the ground and swung. The impact sent the man stumbling, his gun clattering to the ground. Sophia's breath came in ragged gasps, adrenaline surging through her veins. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting back. Across the warehouse, Amanda's voice rang out, sharp, furious. "End this." More men closed in. Sophia braced herself. Then, a siren. The warehouse doors burst open, red and blue lights flashing against the walls. Martinez. The real Martinez. The officers stormed in, the chaos erupting into something worse. Sophia barely had time to process it before hands were on her, pulling her away, shielding her as the final gunshots rang out. And then, silence. Sophia's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Amanda was on the ground, cuffed, Her expression twisted in rage. Sophia met her gaze, her hands trembling. Amanda sneered. "You think this changes anything?" Sophia exhaled. "I know it does." And for the first time in her life, she believed it. The courtroom was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on Sophia like an invisible force. The air felt thick, heavy with the anticipation of the final verdict. Across the room, Amanda sat with her hands folded neatly on the table, her expression unreadable. For the first time in her life, Amanda was not in control. Sophia clenched her hands in her lap, forcing herself to take a deep breath. This was it, the moment she had fought for. For her father. For herself. For every person Amanda and her family had destroyed. The judge cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom before settling on Amanda. The sound of papers shuffling filled the still air. And then, "Guilty." The word echoed in Sophia's ears, her heart stopping for just a second before a wave of relief crashed over her. It was over. Amanda Wilson, the woman who had spent her entire life manipulating, destroying, and killing to maintain her wealth and power, was going to prison. The sound of the judge's gavel hitting the desk was drowned out by the rush of blood in Sophia's ears. She could hardly believe it. She turned her head slightly, catching Amanda's gaze. For the first time, there was no smug smile, no calculating gleam in her eyes. Only rage. Sophia had won. But as Amanda was led away in handcuffs, something unsettling settled in Sophia's stomach. Even behind bars, Amanda still held power. People like her always did. And that terrified Sophia more than anything. The celebration should have felt cathartic. After the trial, James, Detective Martinez, and a few of the people who had helped Sophia along the way gathered in a small restaurant downtown. Drinks were poured, glasses clinked together, laughter filled the air. But Sophia? Sophia felt hollow. She sat in the middle of it all, pushing food around on her plate, barely listening to the conversations happening around her. James nudged her elbow. "You did it," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the restaurant. Sophia forced a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah," she murmured. "I guess I did." James frowned. "Why doesn't it feel like it?" Sophia swallowed hard. Because it didn't. Because even though Amanda was in prison, the world hadn't suddenly changed. Her father was still gone. She had spent so much of her life fighting, clawing her way toward justice, toward something resembling peace, but now that it was over, she didn't know what to do with herself. For years, anger had been the thing keeping her going. Now, she felt lost without it. "I don't know how to move forward," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. James studied her for a moment before reaching for his drink. "You're not alone in this," he said. "You know that, right?" Sophia nodded, but deep down, she wasn't sure if that was true. Because no one else had lived her life. No one else had spent years cleaning the floors of people who wouldn't even look her in the eye. Only to discover that those very same people had stolen everything from her. She had spent so long standing in the shadows of wealth and power that she didn't know what to do in the light. And now, with Amanda gone, her fight was over. But Sophia didn't know who she was without it. 3 days later, Sophia was sitting alone in her apartment when the letter arrived. She found it in her mailbox, buried between bills and advertisements. A small, cream-colored envelope with her name written in perfect, elegant handwriting. No return address. Her stomach twisted. She knew before she even opened it who it was from. With trembling hands, she tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. And then, she read, "Dear Sophia, congratulations. You must be feeling so victorious right now. You must think you've won. But you and I both know the truth. This was never about me. You think sending me to prison makes you safe? That justice suddenly exists for people like you? You're wrong. My family still owns this world. You'll never truly be free of us. I will be back, and when I return, I will make sure you regret every second of this little victory of yours. Sleep well, sweetheart. Amanda Wilson." Sophia's breath left her body all at once. Her hands shook as she stared at the words. A slow, suffocating panic settled in her chest, creeping into her lungs like smoke. Amanda's words weren't a threat. They were a promise. Sophia felt her entire world tilt beneath her feet. It wasn't over. It had never been over. Amanda was just waiting. And one day, she would come back. For the first time in weeks. Sophia felt afraid again, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. Amanda had people, connections. She wouldn't stay locked up forever. And Sophia knew that when she got out, she wouldn't stop until she had taken everything from her. Sophia pressed the letter against her chest, trying to steady her breathing. She had won the battle. But the war? The war was still waiting. She closed her eyes, her mind racing with the weight of the truth. She could run, disappear, start a new life somewhere far away. But Sophia had spent too long running, too long being afraid, and she wasn't going to let Amanda win. Not this time, not ever again. She took a deep, shaky breath and reached for her phone. There was only one person she could call. James picked up on the second ring. Sophia? His voice was alert, concerned. She swallowed hard. We have a problem. He was silent for a moment. Then, with a quiet sigh, he said, where do we start? Sophia thought taking Amanda down would bring her peace. She was wrong. Because now, the real battle was about to begin. And if she wanted to survive, she had to become something more than the cleaning woman who had once been invisible. She had to become someone who could truly fight back. Because Amanda wasn't the only monster hiding in the dark. She was just the beginning. Would you be able to handle the weight of knowing your worst enemy was still out there? Waiting for revenge? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next. Because this story? It's far from over. The world had changed, but not in the way Sophia had imagined. She had spent so much time fighting for justice, for closure, for the truth, only to realize that there was no perfect ending. Even with Amanda behind bars, the past still lingered. There were still nights where Sophia would wake up drenched in sweat, her breath coming in shallow gasps, the ghost of Amanda's threats whispering in her ears. There were still moments when she found herself looking over her shoulder, half expecting someone to be there, lurking in the shadows. Because when you go up against powerful people, they don't just disappear. They wait, they plot, and they always come back. But Sophia had made a choice. She wouldn't live in fear anymore. She couldn't. And so, she did the only thing she could. She built a new life. The road to healing. At first, it wasn't easy. After Amanda's trial, Sophia struggled to figure out where she belonged. For years, her life had been defined by pain, loss, and a battle for the truth. But now, with no one left to fight, what was she supposed to do? She had money now, an inheritance stolen from her family and returned to her after years of lies. She could have bought a mansion, traveled the world, surrounded herself with luxury, but she didn't want any of that. She wanted purpose. So, she went back to the places she knew best, the neighborhoods where people were struggling, where people like her used to live, the places where the wealthy only saw shadows. And she started to help. She used her money to support struggling businesses, to help people get back on their feet. She created scholarships for single mothers, making sure that no woman had to suffer the way her mother had. She worked with legal teams, helping people who had been cheated by the system, people like her father, who had been framed and silenced, because she knew what it felt like to be invisible. And she was determined to make sure no one else had to feel that way. Through it all, James never left her side. He had been there from the beginning, from the moment she had risked everything to warn him about Amanda's betrayal. And now, in this new chapter of her life, he was still there. They were partners, not just in business but in life. Together, they started a foundation, using their resources to fight against corruption, to help those who had been wronged. It wasn't easy. They made enemies. They received threats. But Sophia wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced the worst of the worst, survived the impossible, and came out stronger. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting alone. But just when Sophia thought she could finally breathe, the letter arrived. It was simple, elegant, and written in the same precise handwriting that still haunted her dreams. Sophia, did you really think this was over? You should know better. Watch your back. See you soon. Amanda. Sophia's hands trembled as she read the words. She had expected this. She had known Amanda wouldn't go down without a fight. But she had made a choice a long time ago. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. Amanda had destroyed too many lives. And Sophia was ready. She folded the letter neatly, placed it inside her desk, and picked up her phone. James, she said when he answered. What is it? His voice was instantly alert. Sophia took a deep breath. Her voice steady. Amanda's making her move. There was a long pause. Then, James let out a quiet chuckle. Of course she is. Sophia nodded, her grip tightening on the phone. We end this. For good. Because she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her father. For the people Amanda had hurt. For every single person who had ever been silenced by wealth and power. She had started this battle as a cleaning lady. Invisible to the world. But now? Now she was something else entirely. And she was ready. Because some wars don't end with a single victory. Some wars are meant to be fought until the very last breath. What would you do if you were in Sophia's position? Would you walk away, start a new life, and let the past stay buried? Or would you fight? Tell us in the comments. Let Sophia know that you stand with her. Because her story isn't over yet. And if you want to see what happens next, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because Amanda might be coming back. But so is Sophia. And when that day comes, she won't be fighting alone.